going to have a look at our rolled handles. Now I'm going to show you in faux leather. These can be done in fabric if you want to do them in fabric. Faux leather I think gives a nicer finish, but that's very much up to you. So what I've done is I've cut my panel, I've drawn a line centrally from one end to the other, and then I've added some double-sided tape either side. So I'm just going to pull off the paper off my double-sided tape, and yes, I did prime that to come off because I have awful struggles getting that double-sided tape off when I want to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the raw edge of my strap into the center and push it down onto my double-sided tape. Now this is, I've run out of the one that I like, and this double-sided tape, sometimes it will stick and sometimes it doesn't, so I'm kind of giving it a push down, but I will also probably put in some clips just to make sure it stays put. This is a fairly thick faux leather and it tends to resist being folded, so I'm just going to fold them. Oh, excuse me, my nose is itching. Into that center line, pushing it down onto the double-sided tape. You could use glue if you prefer to use glue rather than double-sided tape. Ideally you would be using a tape that you can stitch through, because you will have to stitch across it. If you don't have a problem with stitching on double-sided tape, then that's fine, but some people do, and it can gum up your needle and cause awful skip stitches, which is not funny. So just keep going, taking all those raw edges into the center, and you can make your handles longer or shorter if you want to. I mean, it really depends on who's going to carry it. Some people like to carry this bag over their arm, so that it's sort of hanging on the arm, so you don't want them ever so long because it will be dragging on your knees. Others like to carry it over the shoulder, so you want it to sit under your arm nicely, so you might want them a little bit longer. It really doesn't make any difference to the construction of the straps. It's just how long you want the straps according to your personal taste, or even your physique, should I say, because that's kind of important as well. So let's get rid of the second side of double-sided tape, and again we're going to push the raw edge into the center so that's wrong sides together, and you'll end up with the two raw edges butted up against each other. Take your time doing this. I find this quite therapeutic. Don't leave gaps. Don't let there be any gaps in between the two raw edges, because if you do that, then your handle will be slightly odd shape, and they don't sit properly if you leave gaps. So make sure that you butt those two raw edges up to each other, so you can't see any of the backing of the faux leather as you're doing it. It's suddenly gone very dark here. I think we're probably in for some thunder and lightning, at which point I will just go and hide under the table and I'll finish videos tomorrow because I don't like thunder and lightning much. So just keep going. I have done this without actually gluing, using any tape at all, thinking, oh, I'll just cut that stage out. Really isn't worth it. The handles don't end up looking the best because they just don't sit properly, especially if you're doing faux leather. If you're using fabric, you can press these these sides in together, and you may well need to put a little bit of possibly even a little bit of Decavil in the middle to give the handle some structure. If you're using fabric, I think that these are better done in faux leather, but it is possible to do them in fabric. The only bit that really absolutely needs to be faux leather is the strap. So there we go, all the way along. And I'm just gonna pop a clip on the end to hold that in place. So I think you can see that you can't, well, you shouldn't be able to if it's pushed down, but the two raw edges are butted up against each other nicely. There's no big gaps in the middle. And on the front of my strap, so that's the bit that doesn't have the seam in the middle, I'm going to make a mark that's 2 inches from the short end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from the outside end up to that 2 inch mark, across and back down, using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I need to remove clips to be able to do that. Just hand crank until you get to that 2 inch mark. Then come across your strap. And that's where you will be going across your double-sided tape, so that's where you need to be really careful. It's worth checking your needle once you've actually done the ends of the straps, just to make sure that the needle isn't gummy, because it will cause you problems later on. I just did one back stitch at the beginning and the end to secure my threads. Just going to cut off that last little bit of double-sided tape that's sticking out the bottom. I'm going to repeat the same thing at the other end of the strap. So making a mark that's 2 inches from the end. And stitching from the short end to the 2 inch mark, across the strap, and then back down to the short end. It's not a strap, it's a handle, I apologise. I'm going to confuse everybody by calling it a strap. Of double-sided tape, and now I've got them all over the blades of my scissors. Well done. Right, now, so we've got this rectangle of, it's not a full rectangle, it's up, across and down of stitching on the end of your strap. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fold the strap in half so that it's got that raw edge. The raw edges are enclosed inside, and I'm just going to clip that together. So I just basically come along, remove some of the clips. We want the folded edges to be perfectly matched. Now, most rolled handles will have something inside of them to give you to give them their shape. Because this is such a narrow rolled handle, you don't need anything extra inside. I think the bag looks nicer with a delicate handle than it does with a thicker one. So that's why we're using this particular technique. So we don't need any piping or cording or anything else inside of this strap. It will be perfectly okay as it is. Okay, now I've put my first clip 1/4 of an inch away from the stitching that went across the strap. And you can check, double check that. Actually, it's not quite 1/4 of an inch, it's a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to move my first clip along a little bit. And I'm going to make sure that my last clip is 1/4 inch away from that stitching, because that's my start and stop marks. And what we're going to do is we are going to stitch along this edge where the 2 folds are, starting at that 1/4 inch, a 1/4 inch away from your stitching that goes across, and finishing at the 1/4 inch mark at the other end. We're going to use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, so we're stitching very close to the edge. So this does mean you do need to really concentrate, stitch nice and slowly. We're not going to bury any threads. We're going to back stitch a couple of stitches at the beginning, just to ensure that everything stays put. So let's start. Try and keep those folded edges absolutely even, and keep your stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the fold. Very carefully feeding through as you go. Removing your clips. But trying again to keep a nice even rhythm to your stitching. If you keep a nice even rhythm, you're much less likely to go whoo, and have one of those moments where it kind of goes off at an angle when you don't expect it to. The heavens have opened and it's blowing a hoolie outside. It's the dark. It suddenly went very dark. Back stitches at the end just to secure your stitching. Get rid of any thread ends you might have. And you can kind of pump up the handles, so just pushing them so that they go round again, because you flattened them where you've been stitching. I have seen people use pipe cleaners, stuffed pipe cleaners, that you might use in sort of craft applications into these, but it makes for quite a stiff, rigid handle, and I don't like that. So it's very much personal taste. I just like to flatten it out a little bit so that they go round rather than staying flat where you've had your presser foot on them. So it just kind of plumps them up. So there we have our first handle. So we're going to make two of those in exactly the same way. So I'm going to get on and make my second one, and I'll come back and show you how the next bit.